Good morning, everybody. We could nearly pull our chairs around and have a nice little intimate discussion, but we'll go as we are. A confession to make, first of all. I know very little about GIS or cartography or anything in that nature, to be honest, and Inspire is kind of a new area for me. My background is a chemist, but I do manage this area within the EPA. And maybe some of the reasons for why I'm talking to you will become clear later on. The good news, I suppose, is if we have very technical questions, there is somebody here who can answer them. This is the river network for Ireland. And I think it wouldn't be an understatement to say that water very much is a dominant feature of the Irish landscape. A lot of it looks like this, a bit more of it looks like that. This is the peculiar part up around the coast of Antrim. It's a kind of the Giant's Causeway. Apparently a giant built these steps out to walk to Scotland. And so look, we've lots of water, and a lot of it is in or around rivers. So in 2000, this thing called the Water Framework Directive came into the legislation books in Europe. It was a big change for us in Ireland. We had legislation on water since the 1970s, but this whole concept of an integrated management of water and how that was to be done raises serious challenges for us. Not from the point of view, well, from lots of points of view, but actually organizationally, how we as different organizations with different responsibility for water, how we cooperated. But just even on a GIS and on a data management level, there were significant challenges. For example, one of the first things that we had to do was to create a rivers network, and we got our original piece of information from that, which was really just digitized lines from a 1956 1 to 50,000 ordnance survey map. It didn't really mean anything. We couldn't do anything with it. We had to add attribution. We had to create a hydrological network. We had to extend the network to the sources and mouths of rivers, and we had to hydrologically correct it before we could do anything with the data. That was a significant piece of work, but it was not, let's say, uncommon for the kind of level of data quality that we were dealing with. We were managing multiple stakeholders. I mentioned this already. There was ourselves, we had river basin districts, we had local authorities or municipalities, we had other institutes. Altogether, there were about 20 different public institutes who deal in the area of water in Ireland. So the initial work we had, and it became clear early on when we tried to begin to bring information together, that this was a bit of a nightmare. So we started, I suppose, around 2004 to pull together our Water Framework Directive schema, our data model, and a lot of guidance about how you prepare information and what the quality has to be and how you do symbology and all of these things which are alien to me. But we put quite a lot of effort out there to disseminate that out to all the data providers so that we would have some consistency of data. In terms of data exchange, I mean, like a lot of organizations, we started using shapefiles. Then we developed a master database in the EPA in accordance with our schema. We got into more technical stuff like using file geodatabases, and now we disseminate data using Inspire compliant web services, and this is kind of the area that really is out of my depth. So I can tell you that the EPA use mostly open source products for Inspire, and we have ISDE, which is the Irish Spatial Data Exchange Service, and we're using GeoNetworks for discovery services, GeoServer for WMS services, and download services. We also use GeoServer. Currently, discovery and viewable services and download, they're accessible either directly by the EPA's own web portal or via the Central Irish Web Portal. Our Inspire data sets we're converting them using the standard ETL, and after conversion, we do a significant amount of data quality checks on those from the web service point of view. That's all the little technical blurb, but I want to get down to something a little bit more down to earth and something I want to talk about. Data quality. This, from early on, has been a significant issue for us, and maybe some of the reasons for that will become apparent. We put a lot of effort in. As I mentioned, we sent out schemas. We said, this is the model, this is how it is, this is how you do it. But still, the data we got back, it didn't conform with the schema we'd sent out. There were accuracy issues in terms of locations of, for example, drinking water abstraction points, urban wastewater discharge points, topological errors, and feature coding. This is something we'll talk about as well. We, as I say, kind of took on this central data management role for water data. So we put a lot of effort into checking the data that we got in, running a lot of automated checks to ensure that to pick up errors and correct them before we integrated them back into our own database. So we kind of expanded our systems effectively to manage data quality. And that effectively meant really tying down the way in which organizations could give us data, really putting more tools out there for them to populate rather than taking in free-form data. We put in a lot more automated validation on data submission. For example, in terms of stations, we validate that the stations are in the sequence that we do expect them. We have another system called EDEN, the Environmental Data Exchange Network, which brings together all of our water monitoring data. That only allows you to upload data. If it has a code, it will kick it back. If it doesn't, the code must be in a required structure. It won't let you upload data outside of your own administrative area, and all of these things. A lot of really tightening down the screws to ensure that we were getting better data quality. This, I won't go through in huge detail, but this is a project we started 5 years ago. We are currently in, hopefully, the final stages of user acceptance testing. There's nothing difficult about this. Technically, to build it, it's not difficult. But we have spent about 4 years working on data quality. This is a feature coding tool. The idea was that this system will give you a code. You will not make up the code. You won't get the code from me. You will go to the system. You will put your investigative point or operational point on the network, and the system will say, there's the code. When we went to we thought we had good data. I was going to one of the slides show you this is our rivers network now, this is our rivers network 5 years on. What's the difference? It's very hard to tell the difference. But I mean, we had to examine 9,000 monitoring stations to make sure that the data in relation to them was correct. A lot of them were out of sequence, some of them weren't stamped onto the river, but this tool, which was developed quite a while ago, just wouldn't work unless the data quality that underpinned the tool was up. And we used the term earlier in the other talk, fit for purpose. It's something that's going to come back over and over again. Is the data fit for purpose? There's nothing to the tool. Again, if you're from an administrative area, it doesn't let you create a monitoring station outside of that. If you're creating a new monitoring station, once you click to the network, it just adds in all the coordinates and all the data is corrected. You can also do things like moving around monitoring stations, and if you move a station from one location to another, it updates the feature code that is actually allocated to that water monitoring station. So technically, as I say, in the tool, there was nothing difficult, but we expended a huge amount of effort in actually getting the underpinning data quality correct. The real driver for this, going back to everything else, the EPA primarily monitors the operational and the surveillance networks. We're responsible for those. We do the codes. But for investigative monitoring, that can happen anywhere. And if we want to get that information into our system, it must have a code. And henceforth, you have to go in here and get a valid code. Right. Getting to the crux. Why? Why do we do this? Because the data we're using now, we're using for key decision-making purposes. More particularly, we are using automated decision purposes. And the reason I have this laptop here is I'll show you a little video of one of the things we use. And we're making decisions based on this information, because it's no longer data. We're processing it, we're grinding it down, and we're coming up with some other figures. There's an old adage, rubbish in, rubbish out, and it's pretty true. So, I mean, in terms of what we're doing in Water Framework Directive, if the underlying data is not of a particular quality, we really can't make decisions based on the information we're getting out. Everybody has seen this nice kind of Esri picture about layers of data in GIS, and when you have your checkbook and you buy the Esri systems, you're kind of led to believe. For a novice like me who knows nothing about GIS, all you need to do is put all these layers together and press a button and you come out with wonderful information. I mean, it's very far from the truth. It's kind of a limited representation. Most, in terms of dealing with Water Framework Directive, your spatial data is a kind of a baseline layer that you hang lots of other informations off, like your monitoring information, like your pressure information. They're just, the details generally are in other databases that you are integrating, utilizing your GIS coding system or your GIS system as a mechanism for doing that. I wanted to talk about this little tool, which is called DREAM, Dynamic Risk Enforcement Assessment Methodology. This was something that we built for our Office of Environmental Enforcement. I was going to ask the question about how many people in the room are actually dealing with GIS and data management, or how many people actually use data or information, because I think if you're working in GIS, sometimes we don't always think about what the uses of it are. In Ireland, as in most other places, we found that we actually don't have enough inspectors to go out and inspect all of the wastewater treatment plants or inspect all of the possible pollution sources for Water Framework Directive. So for quite a while we've been working on risk-based enforcement. So we worked with our OEE to build a tool for them to help them to quantify risk associated with urban wastewater treatment plants in particular. This is a very simplified decision tree of what the tool does, but it effectively asks things like, here's an urban wastewater discharge point. Is there a drinking water abstraction downstream? If there is, how far is it downstream? Is there a bathing water downstream? How far is it? Is there a special area of conservation? Am I in a special area of conservation? So there's a lot of decisions built into this tool. We have 512 or something drinking water plants in the system, but every time we run this thing, and it's dynamic, it makes 35,000 decisions, if you want to call it that. So this really is an aid for our enforcement team. Now this is where it becomes, tricky in the presentation, because I have to find this arrow. Here we go. There we go. Hopefully this will take, it takes about a minute, this presentation. This is our Eden system. We log in, and it's the inspectors who use this. So they go into this dynamic risk enforcement tool, and this is the main way we present information, not in maps. These are the different categories of plants: red, orange, yellow, green. It's important to note those A, 1, B, and C. I'm sorry about the quality. I mean, the risk, everything gets a risk score. The output of this model is to give things a risk score. And so the inspectors can go in and they can sort all of these things depending on the discharge compliance, the observed impact, is the receiving water downstream good or bad, what the possible impacts of this might be, and what's the receiving water, is it a river, coastal, transitional lake, which municipality are we in, which of our own offices are dealing with this, so, and which river basin district. So I mean, like, what they use this for really is they might decide, I want all the kind of the higher risk category things, I want to look at something where there is only a secondary treatment exceeding its current capacity, non-compliant discharges, I want observed impacts which the receiving water is less than good status. We've got 5 treatment plants that fall in that category. So they can go in and see all the information in relation to that treatment plant there, or then we can fire out and show it on a map, and so you see all of the discharge points and the information around that. So they get that information. That's the end of the demo. I wanted to show that because what we're dealing with, what our inspectors look at, is the risk score. It's this decision tree, and now we're dealing with a risk score between 1 and 600. They're not looking at the location of the bathing water. They're not looking at the location of the drinking water source. They trust that this information that they get out of this tool is valid. And I highlighted the A, B, C's and D's because that means, from our point of view, because we charge companies for the privilege of going out and inspecting them. That's just the way we do it in Ireland. So it means you get put into a certain class, it means you will have a certain number of inspections, and you will get charged a certain fee. So there is a real need for us to be able to stand over the quality of the data that are used in that now automated decision-making process. And we're moving more and more to using those systems. Sorry now, next one. Okay, so I will just fire that last one up there. So in relation to Inspire, the question is, how good is Inspire data? If you're going to put Inspire data into your model, what does Inspire compliant mean? That's something I know very little about, but we've had some discussions and we've spoken about what must be filled in and all of the mandatory elements that are there. But data quality is not a mandatory element. So how do I know if the data is actually up to scratch to put in a model? From that point of view, as we said, how do we determine if this data is fit for purpose? And what is the role of the SDI in actually checking the quality and approving it before the user actually uses it in various decision-making tools? And I suppose for somebody like me is, do you need to be an Inspire professional to really understand what the data quality is? And maybe we need a more simplified system. The EEA are always very fond of using their smiley and frowny faces. In my view, I think this is something which is going to become more and more of an issue. We talk about citizen science and crowdsourcing for information. I mean, our experience has been we can get a lot of information. We can get piles and piles of data sets. But when we come to actually making key decisions, we're nearly always resort back to those data sets that we can validate and stand over and say, these are the ones that we know the accuracy is very high on, and particularly when you're getting into those type of models. So that's it. That's my contribution to today. And even where you work, you see that there's a lot of water in our own little work environment. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. The pictures were amazing. Photographs were taken by you, or?
No, colleagues. We have central database.
So artistic, yeah. So nice photographs, and as well as the presentation is very nice. So do we have any questions? Yeah, we have one question at the back. Yes, please.
Well, hello. Okay, hello. Took a while with the technique. Thank you for your presentation, and I got a lot of insights, especially for the data quality discussion that you provided us. And I'm interested to hear a bit more on general remarks from your side about that the Water Framework Directive is a regulation coming from the domain. There are for certain also some requirements regarding data and data quality and availability. How did you manage to streamline the already existing requirements from the domain with the upcoming requirements from Inspire, especially with regards to data quality?
How did we streamline? Well, I suppose we just had to, I mean, we had, as I say, our own data schema dated back to 2003, 2004, before Inspire came online. But we had, I mean, when the ISO standards came into play, we kind of expanded our metadata catalogs and quality elements to include those. So I suppose, I mean, really, we've just kind of tried to populate what we can on the metadata side for Inspire, but I think most of the fields are complete at this point in time. I'm looking down for the person who understands our own Inspire metadata. I don't know if you want to kind of add to that. Thank you very much. But no, I mean, we had a lot of the metadata and quality elements in there already, and so we had kind of validated a lot of those in-house. But that became, I suppose, the EPA's role, really as a sub-partner to the SDI. So we kind of collected the data from various participants, ran a lot of the data quality checks, and then where there were gaps, we kind of fixed those and added it into the kind of the water framework WISE kind of information format. So, I mean, that's been, you know, a kind of an ongoing evolution, really, is from our own perspective. I don't know if that's really addressing. If it's more technical, then I think we'll get Ozan to talk with you about that.
No, just maybe one final conclusion from your side. Did Inspire help you with your work?
Yeah, I suppose in terms of the standards for how we actually disseminate and share data, it has been useful, because at least even though the technical way we could do it has been out there, I suppose there was a certain amount of what would you say, it gives you a certain amount of comfort to know you're moving towards a kind of an internationally recognized standard, or at least a European-wide recognized standard. I think the interesting thing about the comparison between Water Framework Directive and WISE in particular, and Inspire, and I don't know if there's anybody here from the EA, but is the amount of time and investment that the European Environment Agency put in data quality checking. And we go through quite an iterative process once you upload your Water Framework Directive information with quality checks, both from the point of view of spatial accuracy and all the rest of that. And you know, so that's something done in the WFD. I don't see how that's been replicated in Inspire. So I mean, I think that we know that what is available through the WISE system has a certain level of data quality, and I think the European Environment Agency, I don't know if there's anybody here, would even have concerns over some. But that has been a considerable investment on the EA's behalf, and I suppose that's a gap I see with Inspire compliant data. And it comes down to the old argument, you know, we can upload data to Inspire, we can say it's Inspire compliant, and we can put an awful lot of riders in then about the quality, which really make the data pretty unusable, to be honest. So, you know, it's the question of whether you're better having a little good data or a lot of data that you really don't know the quality of. So, and I mean, our experience would suggest, particularly when you get into really, you know, it's not about collecting data. For us, it's not about collecting data. It's about using data to automate that process, to help your staff to do their job. Now, if you can't rely, if there's any link in that chain that's broken, then it doesn't stack up. So, I mean, the data quality has become quite a paramount thing for us, so that we can kind of stand over what the information is that we get out at the end of the process. Sorry, it was a long answer.
What I would like to I was wondering, if, as you use this information in order to put taxes into people, and so, do you give them the opportunity to verify, and if they have additional information, to complete your information in order to make the information of better quality? Do you preview this process?
Well, yes, yes. In this instance, we do. It's not really a tax; it's a fee we charge. So, I mean, it's a kind of a polluter pays thing. And it's mainly the municipalities that own most of these urban waste discharge points. So we share out this tool. This, what I've showed you, we have on a portal, so they can log in. They can look at all their own treatment plants. They can go down through all of the information, you know, that comes up on that right-hand bar, and they can come back to us and say this is not right or that's not right. But we also kind of do a lot of validation of the underlying data before it ever gets out onto that portal. So we do put the information out there publicly for them, and we do that very much as a driver, because we kind of say, you know, if your plant is in the red zone, we're going to come and see you 3 or 4 times a year. So, you know, if there's something you can do to get yourself out of that, well then it's a better kind of a outcome for you at the end of the day.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you.